First, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Mo Burke, and I am the Education USA advisor in San Jose, Costa Rica. And I'm joined here today with my colleague Claudia, who I will introduce in a second. But I just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions today, to please send your questions to Q&A Jackson and Cruz in the chat, as Claudia and myself will be busy explaining the topic. So send your questions to Q&A Jackson Cruz. And if you are with us on Facebook Live, you can write them in Facebook Live, and those questions will be sent to Jackson to ask us at the end of today's presentation. So the topic of today's webinar we're going to talk about graduate admissions, the requirements checklist. And as I mentioned, my name is Mo Burke, and I'm an Education USA advisor in Costa Rica. And I'm pleased to be here with my colleague Claudia, who is an Education USA advisor in Mexico. So to get started, Claudia is going to explain what is Education USA and what the services are that we offer around the world.
Thank you, Mo. So, welcome to this webinar, and let's get started with what is Education USA for those who haven't heard about us before. So, Education USA is the official source to U.S. higher education. It's a U.S. Department of State global network that promotes U.S. higher education and guides students through the application process by offering accurate, comprehensive, and current information about the different opportunities to study at accredited higher education institutions in the U.S. There are more than 400 advising centers worldwide, and if you are interested in pursuing your education in the U.S., you just make sure to contact your closest Education USA advising center. And it is important for you to know that all of our services are for free. So let's clear up some confusion on answers and some frequently asked questions regarding our services. And the first question, and very common question, is, does Education USA have scholarships? And if we are a financial aid program. So Education USA is not a financial aid program. We are an advising program. We do not have funds or scholarships to support your education, but we can guide you to find opportunities and explain how scholarships work, but we are not a financial aid program or scholarship program. Another question we commonly get is, are there opportunities to improve my English? The answer would be yes and no. So yes, in the sense that many universities and colleges offer intensive English programs where you can go and immerse yourself in the English language and take English classes. But no, in the sense that if you're looking for an academic program like a bachelor's, a master's, or a PhD program where you should already be speaking English at advanced level, because all of the homeworks, tests, presentations, and lessons will be in English, you will be required to take an English proficiency test to demonstrate that you have already a high level. Another question that we get is, can you help me find a short-term study abroad program or an internship abroad? Well, we focus on the services and programs offered by U.S. universities and colleges. So we are focusing on intensive English programs, associate's degree, undergraduate, graduate programs. It is important to know this word internship abroad, because if you study an undergraduate or graduate program in the U.S. as an international student with an F1 visa, you can legally petition to extend your visa with a program that it's called OPT, an optional practical training, which allows you to work for up to 1 year legally after graduation in the area you just studied. This is an advantage of the F1 student visa in the US. And finally, we also received a question if we have a specific partnership or agreements with US higher education institutions. We are unbiased, which means we do not have specific agreements. We represent all 4,700 accredited higher education institutions in the US, and we will help you find the best university for you as a student, as a professional, and help you find the best fit. So Our services in Education USA are divided into 5 steps because the process to apply to US accredited higher education institutions might be a little long, but never complicated if you are guided by the Education USA team. So we divide them into step 1, which should be researching your options, understanding the types of institutions in the US, where you can find more scholarships or what kind of institutions don't tend to give scholarships. We talk about the step 2. How are you planning on paying your education? Are you looking for generous funding? Can your parents pay for some of it? Are you looking to take a loan? The step 3 is in the step we are right now, which is completing your application. We can help you out during the process. You'll see along this webinar every detail, don't worry about that. Step 4, after you hopefully are accepted at a college or university, and you are about to go, you need to apply for a student visa. We can explain the process, the documentation that is required. We cannot guarantee that you will be given the visa because it's a decision of the embassy or the consulate of the United States. But we can explain what are the required documents and what tips or things you should bring to your visa interview. And step 5, well, we offer a PDO, a pre-departure orientation. Normally it takes place in June or July every year as we help students to get ready to leave in August or September when their programs start the school year in the US. So remember that all of our Education USA resources are free, and there is always an Education USA advising center close to you. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mo, who has kindly prepared a short poll to continue.
Yes. So we want to get to know our audience a little bit. So we are going to ask you now to fill or answer the poll that you should see on your screen. The first question is, where are you joining us from? This is a regional webinar, so we would like to see if we have students from Mexico joining us, Canada, the Caribbean, Central America, and we're also interested in learning about what type of graduate program are you interested in pursuing in the United States. Are you interested in a master's, PhD? Maybe you don't know yet. Maybe you work in admissions or as a counselor and this doesn't apply to you. So we're going to give you guys a few minutes to answer those questions for us, and then I will share the answers with you because I find them interesting. So we have the majority are joining us from Central America, with Mexico being a close second. We also have representation from Canada and the Caribbean, and we also have someone joining us from another region of the world, which is exciting. About 54% of you are interested in pursuing a master's, but we do also have people interested in a PhD and people who are not sure yet, and that's totally okay. Hopefully after today, you'll have a better idea of what you would like to study. So again, because we like to keep our audience interactive, we are going to do what's called a Menti. So the question I'm going to ask you right now is, from what you already know, your prior knowledge about the application process, what types of documents do you need to turn in when you apply to a master's or doctorate program? So give me 1 second so I can get the Menti started. So you can go to menti.com and you're going to type in the code 26153324. And you're going to go ahead and answer that question for us. So what do you know about the application process? With what you know about the application process, what type of documents do you need? So you go to menti.com, you type in the code, and you start to give us your answers to see what you have heard of. So the code is transcript, cover letter, CV, resume. Okay, we're going to wait for a few more answers. Very good. So the bigger the word means that that's the most common answer. So if it's a really big word, it means a lot of people are giving this answer. So it seems a lot of people are mentioning transcripts. We also have statement of purpose. We also have cover letter. We also have TOEFL. I see essays, GRE. What else? Ooh, very good. So transcripts remains the top contender. CV, GRE, references, certificates, diploma. Very good. Good. So awesome. These are the type of things that we hope to talk about today. So thank you so much for participating in this Menti. I think Mentis are really fun. And now we're going to go back to our presentation. And I'm going to let Claudia explain our agenda for the day. What are we going to be talking about today, Claudia?
So, well, very good. After you all told us what you think of these documents and the application process in general, let's share with you the agenda. We're going to go to transcripts and translations, credential evaluation, CV and resume, the differences between them, a statement of purpose, personal statement, essays, writing sample, letters of recommendation versus recommendation forms, the differences between them as well, and standardized test scores and formal and informal interviews. So, perfect. Mo, starting with the formation requirements, can you share with us what is a transcript? What's the difference between official and unofficial?
Yes, of course. It was the biggest word on our Menti, which means that it's on all of your minds right now about turning this in. So let's go through what is a transcript, because, for example, in Spanish, the word is completely different than transcript. It's not a similar word to that word. So a transcript refers to the complete academic record of all of the courses that you have taken at all of the universities and colleges that you have attended in your lifetime. And this includes any classes you may have failed. So for example, if you have studied at University A and you completed 4 years, and after you graduated, you decided to take a few science classes at University B, but you didn't get a degree, you would still have to send all of your grades from the 4 years at University A and your grades from University B, because that is your entire university experience, your entire university history, right? Transcripts are emitted directly by the university, normally with some type of signature or certification. It could be a digital signature or a physical signature, but these do not refer to you downloading your grades from the website, right? That's not a transcript. It's not an official way that the university can give your grades. And transcripts normally include a page that has the grading scale, because as you may know, in the United States, many universities use a 0 to 4 grading scale, whereas in other countries, we may use a 0 to 10 or a 0 to 100 grading scale. And so you have that paper where it explains the scale, and it also explains what the different letters and abbreviations mean. So for example, M may mean matriculado in Spanish, which means you're currently enrolled in this class, whereas an I in English refers to incomplete. You have not finished that course. You are waiting to turn something in. Maybe L means lab. These are all things that the universities need to know, right? You also need to get them officially translated if they are not emitted to you in English, right? So in many cases in Mexico, Costa Rica, Panama, all of these countries, the documents are emitted to you in Spanish, which means you need to get an official translation. What is an official translation? It's a translation by a person who is certified by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in your country to do true and acceptable translations. These cannot be done by you. They cannot be done by your best friend or your English teacher, right? In some countries, Education USA advisors offer translating services, but not all countries. For example, in Costa Rica, we are not certified translators, but in some countries, Education USA does offer this service. And the translations, just like the transcripts, have to include the translations of the grades and of the grading scale and abbreviations, so that the person reading them can understand that M means matriculado, which means enrolled. They need to understand what all of those different things mean, right? And what's the difference between official and unofficial? So when you ask for your transcripts from your institution, they're probably going to give them to you in paper, right? With their signature and stamps, everything you need to make them official. Then you can get them translated by an official translator, and then you can scan both the translations and the originals, because when you turn these into the university, you have to turn in both the English and the original. That would be the unofficial, uploading it to the website of the university, sending it digitally. That is unofficial in most universities' terms, right? When a university asks you for official transcripts, the majority of the universities are going to ask you for two different options. The first one is that if you can send your transcripts through an electronic transcript system, they may accept that. Unfortunately, this is not common in international universities. This is very common in the United States. So for example, I graduated from Ohio State. And if I need to, I can log in, I can pay $10, and Ohio State will electronically send my official transcripts to any other institution. However, that's not common at the international level, so we do not have that option. And an email, unfortunately, does not count as a normal official transcript. In most cases, you can still ask, but it's not normal. However, the most common way to turn in an official transcript in our experience would be to have the physical printed transcripts and the translations mailed to them in sealed envelopes. So you will have your grades in a sealed envelope from your university with the university stamp, translations in a sealed envelope, you put them in one envelope and you send it with UPS or DHL, which unfortunately means an additional cost. So you should keep this in mind when you're planning your budget. You'll have to pay to ship them, hopefully with a trusted service so that you're not worried if it makes it or not, which would mean an extra cost, right? So to continue, Claudia, do you have a question for me?
Of course. When applying to a graduate program in the US, will I need to turn in official transcripts or unofficial transcripts?
Great question. And this is a very normal question that we get from a lot of students. And the answer is it depends. It depends on the university. Most institutions will allow you to submit your transcripts electronically, which would be considered the unofficial transcript. And then once you have gotten in and accepted your offer to go to that one institution, you would mail them your grades so that they have one copy of your official grades and translations, right? However, there are some institutions that will ask for the official transcripts when you apply, which means if you only have one set of grades and one set of transcripts, you're sending those grades and transcripts to one institution when you're applying, and you will not get them back. So as a result, a common tip that we give our students is to request 2 copies of their certified grades from their universities. And this way, they'll always have one copy with them in case they have to send one to a university, but maybe in the end, they decide to go to University D and they need to send their grades. So they don't have to start over, go back to their university. They already have the grades certified in their house, ready to go, right?
Thank you, Mo. And as a candidate for graduate studies in the US, do I need to send just my grades or my diploma too?
A wonderful question as well. So it will depend because you can apply to a master's or PhD program in the last year of your previous degree. So if you have already graduated, we do recommend sending both your grades and your diploma translated and a copy of the original. Just send it from the beginning so they have it, right? If you cannot get duplicates of your diploma in your country, like in Costa Rica, you get one diploma for life and you cannot get another copy, then you will have to go to your university and ask them to make a certified copy. So for example, in Costa Rica, they have to get a colored copy of the document, bring it to the university with the original, and then the university will stamp it, make some notes so that they know it's a certified copy, and they're not going to send their original diploma to that university. If you haven't graduated when you're applying, you need to send as many grades as possible. So for example, let's say you have one semester left, then you should be sending them the first 3.5 years of your grades. After you are admitted, then you will be required to show them that you have graduated and you have your bachelor's degree. So at that point, you'll have to give them the complete transcript with your 4 years of grades and your diploma, since the bachelor's degree is a requirement to start your graduate degree. Great question. So we just talked about transcripts, but a lot of times when we're looking about transcripts on the websites, we also sometimes see these 2 words, credential evaluation, which I don't think a lot of students know about. So Claudia, can you explain to me what is a credential evaluation and how do I know if I need one or not?
Yes, Mo. Well, a credential evaluation compares the studies you completed in your home country or where you studied abroad to education in the US. So it helps colleges and universities within the US to understand your educational background, and it can include information such as the name of the credential or the degree you earned in your home country or another country, the courses you had taken in your study program, and the US equivalent credits and grades. The equivalent GPA or grade point average in the US, and additional comments or explanations about the credential or degree program. Students can use this report to enroll in further education or apply for a job or gain a professional license or for immigration purposes, but just let's focus on the educational purposes for now. But it is quite important to ask what type of evaluation report the institution requires. So here, well, many universities might have their own credential evaluation department and may not have accept credential evaluations from external evaluators, even if they are part of recognized associations. And for example, the US Department of State recognizes AICE and NASAs as member organizations, which grade evaluation can be requested. Here are some member associations just for your reference, and you will certainly find credential evaluators and at the university's official website. And my colleagues also on the chat box are sharing a link with you as well to take a look at accredited credential evaluators such as NASA's. So there are different types of reports according to the higher education institutions requirements. And one of them is the general, that confirms the authenticity of academic documents and recognizes the status of the institution and the equivalency of your study program. The other one is the general with GPA, which provides the same features as the general, but adds a cumulative GPA, as I mentioned, the grade point average. Another one that's very, very common, the course by course, that provides information on all of your individual coursework, including the US equivalent course title, grade, and credits. A couple more, educational credential evaluation, which is document by document, and professional work experience evaluation. But for now, let's just focus again on the most common report that higher education institutions require in the US, which is the course by course credential evaluation. And this is usually for application to postgraduate programs. Students interested in transferring schools before completing their degree as well. And the report identifies and describes each credential, including the following information, as you may read: the name of the credential, the requirements for entry, the program length, the equivalency in terms of US education, a list of all courses completed at the post-secondary level, a US semester credit and grade equivalent for each course, a US GPA on a 4 scale, and a designation of the level of each undergraduate course. So there are some
Very good.
fees and processing
Just
times.
wanted to jump in really fast, Claudia, to mention one thing about the GPA. Sorry. So if you are required to do a credential evaluation, the credential evaluation will calculate your GPA in USA terms. However, we often get the question, how do I calculate my GPA? And the answer is that you should be turning in your GPA as your university gives it to you. So if your university uses a 0 to 10 scale and you do not have to do a credential evaluation, then you will simply put your GPA as it is given to you in your country. So if it's a 9.2, you put 9.2 out of 10. If you do have to pay these extra fees that Claudia is going to explain to get the credential evaluation, then they will give you that number for you. So that is the one advantage of having to pay for the credential evaluation and go that route. Sorry about that, Claudia. Continue. Tell us about the extra costs.
Thanks for adding that up. So yeah, regarding the fees and the processing times, generally speaking, the credential evaluators on average might take between 1 to 4 weeks to issue an evaluation report, and that's why it's very important to do your application process on time. And you need to take into consideration the additional fees, such as international courier, or if you desire or need to send the credential evaluation sooner to the graduate program you're applying to, or also if the institution you're applying requires the documentation on a sealed envelope. So you need to take into consideration all those fees. And yeah, can we go to the next slide? This is just an example of a credential evaluation report that includes the aforementioned information, as I mentioned, the personal info, the date, the type report, GPA, etc.
Sorry about that.
No, that's
yes,
perfect.
I got excited. Yes,
No,
so as
perfect.
Claudia mentioned, the credential evaluation is not always required, but it is important to check, because if it is required, it is a lot of extra steps and a lot of extra fees, and you need some extra time to get it together. So another question going forward for Claudia, and we're also going to ask the audience with a poll, is that some institutions ask me for a CV and other institutions ask me for a resume. And the question we commonly get is if that is the same thing. So now we are going to have a poll appear on your screen, and we would like you to answer if you think that a CV and resume are the same, or if you think they're different documents, or if you're not sure. And Claudia will answer for you in a few seconds. So we'll give you a few seconds to vote. Okay, so about 52% of you think that they are different. About 24% of you think that they are the same, and about 24% of you don't know. So it seems like we're pretty evenly divided there. And Claudia is going to explain to you, they are different. That is the correct answer. They are different. And so Claudia will give you a brief explanation of how they are different. And our colleagues will also be sending you some extra resources in the chat.
Perfect. So, well, generally speaking, both a CV and a resume are a presentation of your professional and academic story. So what do? These documents are a very important tool while applying for a job or for graduate school, for fellowships, scholarships, among other educational related procedures. But in addition, these documents are a marketing tool where you are advertising yourself. So what's the difference? Well, CVs and resumes are not the same in length, nor the purpose, nor the layout. So a resume is a brief document that summarizes your education, your employment history, and experiences that are relevant to your qualifications for a particular job for which you are applying. Your resume must be like user-centered and persuasive. And on the other hand, the CV, as its name suggests, is an overview of your life's accomplishments, most specifically those that are relevant to the academic realm. In the US, for example, the CV is commonly used when pursuing an academic job, but this is mostly a living document and should be updated frequently. So as you can read in the slide, resumes are usually limited to a page, and the main purpose of a resume is, well, as I mentioned, basically for job, is more customizable. There is more chance to adapt and adjust some things according to the job you're applying for. Yeah, you can list your experiences, your skills. It shouldn't be longer than 1 or 2 pages. It's quite brief. And the CV, well, is mostly used for academic purposes, for scholarships, as I mentioned. It's very important to keep a chronological order. The CV is often run to 3 or more pages. It is more static, if I can call it that way, in comparison to the resume when we are talking about the content. It is a full record of your career history. There is a high level of detail regarding your achievements, and it shows the course of life. So here I share with you the general categories. for both the CV and the resume, also to take into consideration while working on any of those documents. This is only for your reference. Remember that you can contact your Education USA advisor if you have further questions regarding this topic during your application process. So, well, some tips. Let's briefly take a look at some tips while writing your CV or resume. Avoid using templates and colors unless you're applying to arts or design programs where the format and the requirements might be different. Remember to create a new resume for each job if that applies. It is not necessary to name personal references, and use an updated and professional email address. Try to avoid IamArockstar@hotmail.com. Use your name or use any Gmail account as well. And what not to include sensitive information, as you may see there. Do not to include your picture, and avoid lying or inflating the truth about your accomplishments.
Very
Because
good. Thanks,
we can
Claudia.
notice about that.
Yes,
So,
in the United States, we use the honor code. So anything you put on your resume or CV will be accepted as the truth. And if they later find out that it is not the truth, there will be some pretty big consequences. So thank you. Another thing to mention, for example, in cultural differences, it may be common in your country when you apply to a job that they ask you for a CV, when really what they're asking you for is your resume. Because as you just saw, what Claudia explained, a CV is super long, academic, not for a job. So there are differences in the two words, but in Latin America, oftentimes people say CV when they mean to say resume. Very good.
Yeah, and last year we did a webinar about CV and resume. So if you would like to deeply learn about these topics, feel free to click on the link that my colleagues are providing right now on the chat box. And Mo, another question for you. So for my application process to different universities, what kinds of essays will I have to turn in?
Very good. So we already went over the main few things. The main documents are going to be your transcripts, a CV or resume, and some type of essay. So now we're going to look at the different types of essays. Most programs will ask for these two types of essays, although there are other types as well, like a plan of study or study objectives. But today we're going to talk about the statement of purpose and the personal statement, okay? A statement of purpose almost has very few personal details about your life and the personal aspect, and it rather is focusing on your academic and professional experiences. It's a written explanation of your academic past and how your academic past has led you to where you are right now to apply to this graduate program. You also often mention your teaching and research experience because you're trying to get the university to give you a teaching or research assistantship. And you can also mention any other leadership or activities, publications, conferences, if they made a big impact in your life. Remember, all of this information should be on your CV, so you don't need to write it word for word. But finally, the statement of purpose will always end in a deep and detailed explanation of why you are applying to this specific university and this specific program. And it's very important that you explain how this program will help you to accomplish your long-term goals, right? So that's different than the personal statement, because the personal statement can include details about good things that have happened to you, struggles that have happened, really hard times of your life, and how those hard times or good times led you to where you are today to get this degree. You will briefly explain your research and teaching experience, but perhaps not as in-depth as you did in a statement of purpose. And you normally will still explain why you want to go to this specific university. All programs want to know why us, and you need to be very specific. You cannot just say, oh, I am going to gain the skills I need to accomplish my long-term goals. How? What types of courses or programs or labs does this program have that the program at University F does not have? So it's very important to be a little bit specific. As well as the statement of purpose and personal statement, you can also be asked for some additional essays. These are not the only essays, but here are some examples from some essays my students had to write last year. A very common essay last year was the COVID-19 statement, which was a brief statement explaining how COVID-19 affected your personal or professional life, if at all. So, for example, if you had a family member die and it really affected you, You could explain this there. Maybe that's why your grades went down a little bit. Or perhaps you could explain that in your country, all of the laboratories closed, which is why you haven't conducted any research in the last year. Sometimes you may be asked to write an assistantship essay, which is basically an essay explaining why you were requesting a research or teaching assistantship and how this is going to help you complete your graduate studies and your long-term goals. And some institutions may ask for a short essay about diversity, where they want to know how you will bring diversity to their campus, right? So you can talk about if you're a woman in STEM, maybe you're an engineer from a very, very small town on the coast, maybe you're an LGBTQI individual. You guys can talk about if you're Latino or Latina, any way that you are diverse and that you hope to bring diverse experiences to the university as well. Additionally, in some cases, you may see the words writing sample. So Claudia, what is a writing sample? And does everyone need one? Or how do I know if I need one or not?
Well, Mo, whether you're applying for a job, an internship, or a graduate school, a graduate program, you may be asked to provide a writing sample that gives evidence of your ability to think critically and articulate your ideas in writing. So its purpose is to give evidence of your qualifications to enter to graduate school at the program you're applying to. Some departments require uploading a writing sample with the admission application in the space provided, but some graduate schools have no specific formatting requirements. However, each department might have set their own. The best way to demonstrate your writing qualifications is by discussing an issue area relevant to the program for which you are applying. There are no excuses for spelling or grammatical errors in a writing sample. So you need to be sure to proofread the entire piece and have a trusted friend or a colleague to double check your work. Of course, your Education USA advisor is the best person to reach out for help. And we all have useful and free resources for these matters. And what makes a strong grad school writing sample? In 3 words: content, style, and structure. So yeah, can we go to the next? Here are some graduate programs that might require writing samples. I insist there are hundreds of graduate programs in the US, and this is just a limited list of programs that might require this type of samples. And if we can go to the next slide. Here we share with you the instructions of Colorado State University that requires a writing sample for the candidates interested on applying on a Master of Arts in Teaching English as a Foreign Language or Teaching English as a Second Language program. And just as this institution provided the specific requirements, each program might give their own. So, well, maybe Mo, can you tell us what's the difference between a letter of recommendation and a recommendation form?
Yes, sure. So most institutions, as well as asking you for your transcript, a CV or resume, and some type of large essay, and maybe a writing sample, they're also going to ask you for recommendations. Most universities ask for letters of recommendations, which are normally written by previous professors or employers, and they're going to discuss your academic and professional abilities, as well as any teaching or research experience. You do need to give them enough time to write it, as the people in your life are busy individuals. So hopefully you can give them a month to write it, or more if it's the end of the semester, for example. So in most cases, the institutions will ask for 2 to 3 letters, and these do need to be written in English because university officials in the United States oftentimes do not speak other languages than English, and they would like the official translation so that they can get the real reference given by your professor or employer. In most cases, if you're applying for an academic program, they will want to see the letters from professors. However, if you graduated a few years ago and then you worked for a few years, it's also valid to send a letter of recommendation from an employer, because the employer is someone who just recently watched you work professionally, right? These letters are not uploaded by you, they're uploaded by the person who writes them, normally on an online platform. So you'll go into the university application and it'll say, who are your recommenders? And you can put Mary Smith, you put her email, and she will receive an email that says, Mo has assigned you as a recommender for her application to the master's in TESOL at Colorado State. Please upload your letter, right? You as a student cannot see these letters because these, if you see the letter, then the teacher or professor or employer may change what they write. We want them to be honest. So you also cannot translate them. So if your professor does not speak English, there are a few suggestions. One, ask them to ask an English-speaking colleague to translate, to help them with the translation. Or two, you will have to give them the email address of your translator so that they send the letter directly to the translator, and the translator will send the letter back to them. You typically have to pay, you will have to pay for the translation in this case because it is for your application, but you should not see these letters. And if they translate them, they need to turn in both the original and the translation so the university can see that this professor does not speak English. Some universities and colleges, however, are not asking for letters, but instead they have recommendation forms. And recommendation forms are specific sets of questions. So they don't have to write a letter. They have to go in and answer these questions about the student. So in this case, if the university is asking or gives you a form, you do need to choose recommenders that speak English, because if not, they will be trying to translate this form and they may answer it incorrectly because of their translation with Google Translate or something like that. So for example, a lot of Google recommendation forms ask the professors to rate the students on a specific scale. So from 1 to 10, what is the student in this? From 1 to 10, what is the student in this? And they will circle their answers and maybe add a few sentences at the end, but it's not as long as a letter recommendation. So we also have heard of the famous tests that you may have to take when you're applying to a master's or PhD program. So Claudia, can you explain what kind of tests you may have to take and how you go about turning in the scores?
Sure. As an international student applying to a graduate program in the US, you might be required to take some standardized tests for admission. Such is the case as international student, no native speaker of the TOEFL IBT. And this test assesses your ability in terms of reading, listening, speaking, and writing. And your $180 test fee in Mexico, because it changes depending on the country you are located, includes up to 4 free official score reports to be sent to the destinations that you select before you take the test. And you can add or delete the score reports recipients through your ETS account, either online or by the app, one day before your test. And you can view your scores as well in your account approximately 6 days after you take the test, and you will receive an email when your scores are available. And such scores are valid for 2 years after your test date. So during that time, you can order additional score reports for a fee of $20 in Mexico per institution. Approx. And regarding the GRE, well, that measures verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, and analytical writing. And the test fee in Mexico at least is $205, but it changes depending on the country you are located, I insist. And you can designate that your test scores be sent up to also 4 graduate institutions as part of your test fee. And for this test, you will be required to designate your 4 score recipients at the test center after you viewed your verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning score. So if you wish to send scores to additional institutions or send the scores after the test day, you will be able to do so by ordering additional school reports for a fee of, at least in Mexico, $27, but you can check on the official webpage this additional fee. And just to mention, there is also the GMAT test, mostly for interested students in MBAs, and you can find the additional information on the official website. And my colleagues are sharing as well the the link with you. And nowadays, because a lot of universities are adapting their admission requirements due to COVID-19, many institutions provide this test optional alternative and consider your application holistically. Thus, interviews are quite important aspect of the application process. So, Mo, what are interviews like for graduate programs?
Great, thank you. Yeah, so not all programs will have interviews, so don't worry if you are not reached out for an interview. It's not standard among all institutions, but we have seen an increase in master's and PhD programs asking for interviews because they may not have the GRE score to compare or look at, and they want to get to know the students. So, and it's definitely more common at the graduate level because of the fact that they're going to ask you to be a teaching assistant, graduate assistant, research assistant, and they want to get to know you and see if you truly are an expert on the area that you claim to be an expert of. And this is normally after you have applied and they have looked at your application. So you should not expect this in September or October. This may happen in January or February after you have already applied, and they can be very different depending on the institution and the program. So I'm going to give you two very different examples that happened to some of my students last year. So first, one of my students had an informal interview, many of them, and they were normally short Zoom calls that were 20 to 30 minutes long with 1 to 2 professors from the program you applied to. In this case, I always think it's a good idea, even though it's informal, to prepare 2 to 4 PowerPoint slides about yourself where you introduce your background, maybe you talk about your research and teaching experience. Keep it short and sweet and professional. We don't need to see a picture of your little sister or your dog, but rather a picture of your research and what you've been doing, right? You should also prepare some questions for the professor to show them that you have researched their research, right? These questions should not be, when will I know if I got in? But rather, I saw the article you published on this topic. Have you ever considered looking at this enzyme to try this or something like that? And I think it's polite to send a thank you email 1 to 2 days later, expressing your gratitude and for the chance to chat. And it's also a way to kind of remind them and appear in their mind again a few days later so that they think about you. On the other hand, I did have a student that had a formal interview, and it was a 3-day interview with a series of panels and interviews and informative sessions with the different faculty, which are the professors, and current PhD students from the department. So in this, you do extensive research about all of the professors in the department and even the PhD students that are that are studying there, because you may have a meeting with any of them. And just because you may not hope to work with this professor, you should still have general knowledge about what they're doing. You should also be prepared to explain your research experience and publications in a PowerPoint. Not read your slides, but rather making an engaging presentation. And be prepared to explain why you want to research that specific topic and why you want to do it in this institution. And for both informal and formal, please dress professionally. If you're a boy, I recommend a nice button-up shirt, maybe a tie. If you're a girl, a nice blouse. Have a clear background, minimal background noise. You may even create your own Zoom background with your university's logo or your research institution logo. You can be creative now that we are virtual. So we have covered all of the topics that we want to cover today, and I'm sure some of you may be a little bit overwhelmed. So we want to ask you one last question, and that question is, what is the next thing that you want to work on in regards to your application process? So after you learned all of this information today, are you most excited to work on your resume or CV or your standardized tests? It is multiple choice. You can select more than one thing if that's the case for you, or you can just select one. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to answer that, and we want to see what kind of questions we should be expecting from our advisees in the next few months as they start their master's and PhD applications. So about 63% of you selected that you all would like to check to see if your institutions require a credential evaluation, which is a good place to start. But then 50% of you also said that you would like to get started on your CV or resume. So I recommend that you follow us on Facebook and Instagram because we will probably have some type of regional webinar about the differences, sorry, not about the CV and resume, about the different statement of purpose and personal statement. As Claudia said, we sent you a link already of a great webinar we did last year about the differences between a CV and resume. I recommend you take the time to watch it. I learned a lot. We all learned a lot. It's a great webinar. So at this time, I'd like to invite my colleague Jackson, who is collecting questions throughout this webinar. Remember, if you have any questions, you need to send them to Jackson. Jackson, what questions do we have today?
Thank you, Mo, and thank you, Claudia, for such a wonderful presentation on graduate studies. And we do have some questions from an audience. So the first one goes on a CV, what does a professional affiliation mean?
So a professional affiliation could be mentioned in one of the categories, probably like more extracurricular, because as Claudia said, you'll have your education portion, you'll have your research, you'll have your teaching portion. Being affiliated, for example, to the American Chemistry Society should be mentioned on your CV, but it'll be in a different category, more at the bottom. It could be an extracurricular category. You could put professional organizations. There's a lot of different ways that you could mention it on your CV. And you should mention as well how long you have been affiliated and what you're required to do as a member in that organization.
Thank you, Mo. The next question is, how important is the statement of purpose when applying for a master's degree or a PhD?
Claudia, would you like to take that one?
It is very important. Both the personal statement and the statement of purpose are documents, are very important documents because those are the opportunity, mostly the personal statement is the opportunity for you as a student to talk about yourself and what you have done through your whole life until the present, what inspires you to apply to a graduate program. So yeah, it's the opportunity for you to shine.
Especially if there's no interview for that. Exactly. Especially if there's no interview for that program, the statement of purpose or personal statement is the document where they will get to know who you are as a person, as a professional, as a researcher, as a academic person. So it's very, very important, and it requires that you do multiple versions until you perfect it.
Thank you both, Claudia and Mo. Next question. For a graduate program, is it best to get letters from a volunteer coordinator, or maybe a teacher or employer?
Someone who knows you and who can
Someone
express.
who knows you, who can express, and you also have to think about the relevance in regards to
the program you're applying
you're applying to. So if you are applying to a program that involves a lot of research in the lab, then you will definitely want to ask for a letter of recommendation from someone who has seen you in the lab and can talk about the specific skills that you have and know what to do. If you are applying to a program in teaching, then you may want to ask for a letter from a professor that was watching or in charge of your practicum and has seen you in the classroom.
Coordinator or supervisor.
At the graduate level, I don't know how relevant a letter from volunteering would be. It depends on the topic of volunteering. If the volunteering is directly related to your area of study, it could be a good letter. However, if you volunteer in a dog rescue center and you're applying to a PhD in biology, it may not be the best letter recommendation because it's not very relevant to what you would do in the biology lab.
Right. Thank you. Thank you both. And the next question, Karen Leighton says, I see that universities are accepting TOEFL IBT, but I don't see anything in regards to the TOEFL at home. How do I know which one they can take, or if they are taking the TOEFL at home version?
You can contact directly to the university. You can write them and directly ask if they accept the TOEFL IBT at home version. That's my advice. Margaret, what do you want to add?
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. I think that oftentimes the websites vary in the type of information they have. Some websites will have a lot of explicit information and other websites may not. And you will have to send emails to the department chair and ask these specific questions, and they will be happy to answer them and help you. You can even reach out and ask them. Some programs were accepting Duolingo because of the pandemic, but maybe it wasn't expressed on the website, but they told you via email. So it's always great to reach out with an email and double check the requirements.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And we have Victor Chavez. Given the standardized testing like GRE was mostly waived for this year due to the pandemic, when is it the usual month or period of the year in which university announced the requirements for the admissions for fall 2022?
Well, the information is available during the whole year. So if a candidate is interested in applying to a university, well, you can contact your Education USA advising center to have this calendar and schedule the months where you need to, for example, work on your essays or studying for the tests, the application deadlines, and
Right.
all the requirements.
Most of the time, the requirements for a master's or PhD program remain the same year to year. But if they were to change something, I'm guessing that they would probably change it in August or September, because that is when the school year starts in the United States. So in August and September, they are now expecting individuals to be thinking about applying in December. And so they will probably update it. So you can just check again in September and see if anything has changed. But most of the time, the requirements remain the same. It may change very, very, very slightly, but not much.
Great. Thank you. And we have Daniela Perez with the following question. Can recommendation letters be from 3 advisors from your bachelor's thesis, or is it better to have a different professor as a recommender?
Again, I think it depends a lot on what your thesis was about and the relation to the program you're applying to. You definitely want to have at least one letter from a thesis advisor, because that was a huge project that you did. But if a university is only asking for 3 letters and you ask for the 3 letters from the same project and you had this awesome research experience that you didn't talk about, then that's where you would want to say, okay, maybe I ask for a letter from this research experience as well as my thesis advisor. It depends a lot on your profile and what you're applying for.
Thank you. And one question that I will go ahead and answer. Some of the people that are with us right now are asking how they can contact Education USA advisor. We have posted the link so that they can find the closest or nearest advising center in their city, and so that they can go ahead and reach out. So it's on the chat box to get that information. And we do not have any other questions.
We're just in
time. Thank you.
Great. So as I mentioned, this is a regional webinar, which we organize every Wednesday, and sometimes we also have them on Mondays. And so our next webinars, we have one on Monday, May 17th at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time in Mexico City, for example, and 6 p.m. on the East Coast or in the Caribbean. And that is for undergraduate students, talking about the importance of volunteering and things like that. And at the graduate level, a week from today, next Wednesday, we will have one called Grad School Application Beyond Academics. So beyond your grades and your GPA and your TOEFL score, what can make you a strong graduate applicant, and what are things that you should be looking to do? It is a week from today at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, so 30 minutes earlier than we began today. And my colleagues should be sending you the registration links in the chat. Thank you so much for being with us today. As we mentioned, please reach out to the closest Education USA advisor near you, and we hope to see you in our future regional webinars. Have a great day. Keep washing your hands and stay safe.